In today's tier list, I'll be going over the ultimate ranged nuke tier list. I'll be ranking 211 ranged heroes from SSS all the way down to E. I will only be ranking heroes with preference weapons, and I will not be considering arcane weapons, unless for the rearmed heroes themselves, like rearmed Tana or Ophelia. Unfortunately, adding arcane weapons to the mix increased the amount of heroes I needed to rank by a considerable amount, and most notably increased the amount of builds I needed to sim and test by almost double. I constructed this tier list by running over 3,000 sims and tests, using my own experience as well as talking to a lot of other rank 1 ether raids, summoner duels, and arena players. Each hero on this list was also ranked based off 5 categories: damage, special, safety, mobility, and support, with damage and special having the biggest focus, as this is a nuke tier list of course. Now let's quickly go over each category and what it entails. First up is damage, and for me, damage is the unit's stat line, effects that increase stats in combat, and effects that directly increase damage, as well as some effects that help the unit double. Some of the major effects a nuke will want from this category are true damage, effective damage, a brave attack, and obviously a powerful offensive stat line. My second category is special. Special is also a damaging category, but these are all the effects that lower special cooldown, make specials more consistent, or make specials deal more damage. In today's metagame, specials are dominant, and a majority of nukes rely on specials to land killing blows or deal a ton of damage. And a major reason for that is due to damage reduction being rampant in the meta. Some examples of the big effects you need as a nuke are damage reduction piercing, some way to lower cooldown via effects like slaying, special acceleration, or even times pulse. And finally, the value of anti-guard or tempo has skyrocketed with the prevalence of guard in the meta. The third category is safety, and this category is not as highly valued as the first two, but it is very important, as if a nuke doesn't have a way to safely engage on an enemy, they will often die to counterattacks and be unable to secure kills. Safety includes effects that reduce damage, effects that nullify opponents' counterattacks, and effects that can guarantee the nuke's survival. The fourth category that can be very important depending on the game mode is mobility. Mobility allows nukes to threaten a large portion of the map, snipe key targets, and often retreat. The main features of mobility are movement type, effects that increase the spaces of movement a unit has, and warping, which has become one of the most powerful effects in the meta at the moment. The final category I will be considering is support. Now this may seem a bit weird on a nuke tier list, but a nuke being able to offer support while also dealing damage is invaluable. And often when we look at the units that stand the test of time, it's the heroes with combined roles, being able to deal damage and supporting the team. If you're looking to invest for the long term, then definitely consider the support grading for each hero. Support entails any effect that helps allies, any effect that penalizes foes, and I will only be considering inherent effects on the unit. In other words, I won't be heavily focused on what units can inherit, as Guidance 4 would essentially make every flying hero get the highest ranking possible, though that is something I considered. One other thing I quickly want to bring up is the Infantry Advantage. Infantry units as a movement type have a massive advantage over every other movement type, and the reason for that is simply skill inheritance restrictions. I won't go super in depth here as that warrants its own video, but infantry units have access to almost all important effects via skills, such as no follow-up via the Sacred Seal, B skill, or outside support effects like Infantry Speed Tactic. They also have damage reduction piercing via Special Spiral 4, cooldown reduction via Times Pulse, or special acceleration via the Blade effects. They can get anti-guard via the Tempo B slots, and somehow even non-mages have access to adaptive damage via Hexblade. Infantry units are extremely versatile and can have many of their weaknesses fixed via the skills they inherit or easily accessible outside support. So you will notice on average infantry units are ranked higher than their contemporaries, though this will be somewhat less prevalent in the higher tiers. The final thing before we jump into the first tier is I will not be going over every single hero on this tier list in depth, as this video would last forever, but I will be doing so for the higher tiers as well as some of the more unique heroes in the lower tiers. Let's jump into the very bottom with E tier. Now, E tier heroes are unfortunately units that have bad stat lines due to either being poorly optimized or just being really old, and they have preference weapons that don't help them deal more damage. These heroes may be decent in other roles, but as nukes their damage just isn't anywhere close enough to where it needs to be. In D tier are heroes who are just old. What this means is that even with a decent stat line, their preference weapon doesn't offer enough to be used in today's metagame. These heroes are usable, but they are going to need to switch over to an arcane weapon in most cases, which is something I won't be discussing here. But I do have videos for all the arcane weapons if you are interested. In C tier are the heroes who can be powerful in the right situation, but have a lot of weaknesses that hold them back, such as less than great stat lines, no access to powerful special effects, or having less than great preference weapons. Just like with D tier, these heroes are prime targets to inherit arcane weapons to, as they can easily jump several tiers with an arcane weapon and the right build. B tier has some great heroes who can perform really well in certain game modes or in certain matchups, but often they require a lot of support to do so. They also may need to double to secure kills, but can struggle to do so. This can be caused by their speed not reaching the extremely high meta levels, or them being reliant on guaranteed follow-up attacks that can be easily denied by things like Hardy Fighter or no follow-up. These heroes are still good, and with the right build, they can perform extremely well. One great example of this tier is Pirate NUKE, who is ridiculously good nuke, but she has 2 big hoops to jump through to get her full firepower. She needs to outspeed the opponent, and she needs to have color advantage against them. This means Pirate NUKE is fantastic against blue units, but can really struggle in other matchups. One infamous unit in this tier is Duo Lith, who helped to cause the end of the original Godsword meta thanks to his ridiculous damage, damage reduction halving, and fatal smoke. But in today's meta, Hardy Fighter counters him quite hard as he is reliant on that guaranteed follow-up attack. And the final hero I have to discuss in B tier is of course the Reinhardt himself. Reinhardt is the original god nuke of Fire Emblem heroes. He was a menace that dominated the first year's meta, and even until this day he can still be quite threatening with solid investment and in the proper matchups. But Reinhardt does struggle against damage reduction, which drastically limits its effectiveness in this meta, which is dominated by damage reduction. Now, A tier is where we start to see some real meta heroes. These are heroes you will see in a lot of game modes, but they require supports to function at full power, or they have some hard counters that exist in the meta. These heroes all have 1 or 2 major weaknesses that need to be addressed by support units for these heroes to really shine. A great example of this is Yune, who got one of the best refines and remixes in the entire history of the game. She went from literally a worthless defense mythic to a major threat. She accomplished this by having access to a better version of Dominance, which grants a ton of true damage, up to 100% damage reduction against the opponent's first attack, and most importantly, absolutely ridiculous support in the form of her preference C skill, Chaos Named Plus. This skill can absolutely slaughter the opponent's stats by debuffing the entire enemy team and inflicting panic on them, which in turn enables her weapon as well. The major problem Yune has is that Peony and Legendary Robin exist. Peony can completely cancel out a unit's debuffs, which means if they position that unit correctly away from their allies, Yune doesn't get her massive true damage. And Legendary Robin can actually turn those debuffs into massive power for their entire team. This makes the choice of using Yune much more reliant on matchups and less of a unit you can just slap into any team like she once was. Another great example of needing supports is one of our newer mythics, Sather. Now Sather has a whopping 20% true damage based off her resistance, which means with an AoE build, she can completely erase units off the board. But as a cavalry unit, she needs support to help her get that AoE cooldown reduced. Also, when it comes to her more conventional builds, she isn't very fast, meaning she's very reliant on a guaranteed follow-up attack, which can be countered quite easy in the meta at the moment with no follow-up and Hardy Fighter. Once again, Sather is a very good nuke and can tear defense maps apart, but you will need to build around her to take full advantage of her strengths. The final unit in A tier we have to discuss is Mark. Now Mark is what I like to call a stat ball unit. Essentially, he has lots of ways to get a ton of stats via buffs or debuffing the enemy, and then he essentially just clubs them over the head with stats until he wins. He lacks a lot of the more specialized damaging effects, like a brave weapon, effective damage, or even true damage. But he definitely makes up for that with his really powerful sabotage and stall support that can make the entire team stronger while also shutting down mobile threats. He also works very well with the special spiral build due to his built-in anti-guard. The only thing holding Mark back once again is his slow speed, meaning he can struggle to double, which he typically does need to secure kills against the more powerful meta tanks. Here is S tier, and we now have stepped into the realm of very meta heroes. These heroes show up all the time in different game modes and all have 1 or 2 unique effects that make them stand out from their peers. All these heroes have solid stat lines and can do a lot of damage, though typically they do have 1 or more weakness. The first unit in S tier is Duo Nina. Nina is a great example of a very powerful unit, but with a lot of things holding her back. Obviously, her damage is insane, with adaptive damage and true damage based off the foe's penalties or her own bonuses, whichever is higher. And her ridiculous mobility thanks to Canto Recall and 4 spaces of movement with her duo skill. But her special category, unfortunately, is trash. The only thing she has access to is lethality, but realistically, she has no way to proc it due to her lack of slaying, no access to Time's Pulse, and she doesn't have a way to get past guard. She also struggles to double thanks to no follow-up, and is quite fragile, so she is reliant on Remote Sparrow not to die to a counterattack. And of course, Canto Control hard counters her and removes one of her main claims to fame. Now Nina can be fantastic and completely dominate, but you're going to need special supports like Duo Asker and Katie and Lynn. Monica is an often forgotten mage who can put out a ton of damage and do it very safely due to her built-in desperation effect. This allows Monica to hit twice immediately, popping off a ruptured sky before the opponent can even retaliate. The one downside Monica has is that she has to choose between Tempo and Special Spiral 4, which means she'll either be weak to guard or damage reduction. Arguably the best Grail nuke in the entire game, Young Innis is still extremely strong. His weapon offering built-in damage reduction piercing is fantastic, and it allows Innis to run a 2 cooldown special instead of Deadeye, which makes him much more consistent. All the new infantry skills have also allowed him to optimize his firepower and also get some nice damage reduction through Remote Sparrow. The crazy thing is, Innis hasn't even got his Refine yet, which means he can only get better from here. A hero in contention for the best 4-star demo ever is Summer Claude. Claude is a fantastic nuke with his conditional Brave weapon that even has slaying. Fallen Star adds a ton of safety to Claude's engages, while also adding some nice gravity support, shutting down the enemy team's mobility. And when it comes to his own mobility, he even has built-in Canto remaining, meaning he can kite quite well. The build I'm showing is his self-sufficient one, but if you run him with cooldown support like Duo Asker, you can even use a lethality build, which is quite horrifying. Ascended Alencia is one of our new powerful meta healers, and just like the others, she can destroy enemies while also supporting her allies. Her weapon offers Alencia a massive boost to attack and speed, and thanks to Dazzling Shift, she can even engage very safely while also being very mobile with the built-in warping. And as a new age healer, she has built-in slaying, which means she can effectively use the new powerful healer specials. Lastly, her support is great with her guaranteed follow-up buff alongside a visible 6 attack and speed buff as well. Personally, I think her best build sacrifices a bit of power in her C slot for Guidance 4, which really turns her into the ultimate mobility support. If there is one nuke who has flown under the radar this year, it has to be Valentine's Leo. This unit is actually ridiculously good. This mostly comes down to the plethora of powerful effects he has that allows him to deal a ton of damage while also offering unique double gravity support. First of all, his weapon offers a nice 20% true damage, a guaranteed follow-up attack, and most notably, offensive no follow-up, which is quite unusual on such a slow unit, but it's a great addition. And on the other hand, he can do a gravity ploy effect at the beginning of his turn and at the end of his turn as well, which can completely shut down the enemy team's mobility while also debuffing their defense and resistance. Leo really is the full package and is definitely a unit who has a lot of potential to stir up the meta. I could not be happier to be placing Petra into S tier. Petra's Refine kinda was forgotten due to the plethora of meta-shaking refines around that time, but Petra is not someone you should underestimate. Her weapon offers a ridiculous amount of stats, anti-guard, damage reduction, and offensive no follow-up. This allows Petra to run a powerful sweep build that can allow her to do a ton of damage while being safe from most threats. She either can deny their counterattack completely with Wind Sweep or drastically reduce the damage. Ruptured Sky allows her to double down on her beast killing alongside with some dragons and is the more consistent special option, but she can also run a lethality build with some cooldown support, and then she melts most of the meta tanks in the game. Another one of my favorite girls, Duo Legyarn, also lands in S tier. Legyarn offers a lot of nuking power with her dual phase Brave weapon and a ridiculous amount of stats. Her high resistance also makes her a great nuking option to kill those pesky dragons who rely on Dragon Wall for damage reduction. She also is extremely bulky, meaning it can be difficult to kill her in one attack before she retaliates with a Brave attack of her own, destroying your unit. And of course, she has one of the best duo skills in the entire game, a Self Gale Force. Who would have known, but we got 2 amazing Taunas in 1 year. First up is Flame Taunt. Taunt is a great mix of firepower and support. Her weapon offers a massive 20% attack against blue, green, and colorless enemies, while also debuffing their attack by 20%. This makes Taunt into a fantastic user of Heavy Blade, which can give her some of the special acceleration she really needs to run lethality. When it comes to support, Taunt gives everyone Canto 1, which not only makes her mobility amazing, but the whole team's as well. This can allow for some amazing openings in Summer Duels, or even for a quick hit and run effect in Ether Raids. While Flame Taunt offers the team some great mobility, Rearmed Taunt is the mobility god. Her introduction of Guidance 4 has completely changed the way the game can be played, and that's not even talking about her own mobility thanks to her Preference B skill, Soaring Wings, that grants her Canto 1, Ash Warping, and a ton of stats. The only thing that holds Taunt back in my opinion is she can struggle to proc Deadeye against foes with Guard or units who don't retaliate against her, and she also doesn't have access to offensive no fault very easily, which really does hold her back. Fallen Maria is the new kid on the block, and man, she has made a splash. Not only is she one of the best support units in the entire game, but she's also a new age healer who will murder you after resurrecting a friend. Her weapon offers the normal stats, but also anti-guard, which means she can make full use of the new healer specials, and we can't forget Poetic Justice, that gives her a nice chunk of true damage as well. Essentially, you get a free resurrection, an Omni drive with +4 to all stats, and a powerful damage dealer who can even safely engage with Dazzling Staff. Her only real downside is that she doesn't have offensive no follow-up, but that's easily remedied with a plethora of options as she is an infantry unit. Summer Lin got one hell of a refine. She went from obsolete to sneakily one of the best flying nukes in the entire game, especially against a lot of the meta save armors. Her weapon is the full package, offering stats, slaying, anti-guard, offensive no follow-up, and effective against armored and flyers. The final piece of the puzzle is her wind sweep effect that also works on dragons. This allows Lin to safely snipe enemies while dealing big damage. Her one downside is that she does need some cooldown support to consistently proc Deadeyes. Up next is the 3 Byleths. Let's start off with our newest Byleth, Cadian Byleth. This Byleth is one of the best, if not the best 4-star demote in the entire game. He is able to put out a ton of damage thanks to his preference special, Sublime Heaven, and even guarantees its proc thanks to his built-in tempo, on top of also having a nice layer of safety due to his built-in dodge. He also has the Cadian effect that allows him to ignore terrain effects, which does allow him to have some extra mobility and threaten a larger portion of the map. After that, we have Female Byleth. Originally, I had Female Byleth 1 tier lower, but the introduction of Special Spiral 4 and Remote Sparrow fixed Byleth's 2 major weaknesses: damage reduction piercing and safety. Byleth is now able to guarantee nukes with a damage reduction piercing Ruptured Sky due to her built-in no follow and tempo effect, while also being able to survive counterattacks thanks to Remote Sparrow. She also has some nice warping mobility. She has definitely aged quite well and only gotten stronger with the introduction of new skills. The last Byleth we have to talk about is Legendary Male Byleth. Male Byleth is the opposite of female, where he has gotten a bit less valuable with time. His big shtick of drive no follow-up isn't so special anymore, but even so, he is a powerful nuke, mostly due to the power of Sublime Heaven. Running the build I'm showing allows him to have safety from Remote Sparrow and tempo as well. He essentially does everything Female Byleth does, but just trades drive tempo for drive no follow-up and gets a way more powerful special. When Saline dropped, everyone saw a cute girl with some nice healing support, but the truth is, Saline is a killer. This unit does offer insane healing, but she also gets a massive 15 true damage per hit, and when you combine that with all the premium infantry fodder, Saline can unleash some devastating damage, all while keeping your team nice and healthy. At the beginning of last year, the meta was smashed by 2 mage calves, Winter Lysithea and Duo Corrin. Unfortunately for them, the meta did quickly adapt, making the Deflect Magic Seal almost mandatory. But even so, these 2 units proved to be powerhouse nukes. Lysithea was one of the first units to cheat, getting a pseudo-brave weapon, but with full might and even slaying. And when you add in a Brave or Desperation effect, you get one powerful cav nuke. I found Lysithea to be one of the best nukes for a cav line, especially in Dark Season, where Emblem can turn off saves and any support via her feud effect. Lysithea can smash through most foes, she can outspeed, and does a number on any unit without a ton of damage reduction. On the other hand, we have Duo Corrin, who has a more standard Brave weapon, but she does get a nice 7 true damage per hit. And when you combine that with the Duo skill that lets you self Gale Force, you get a meta sweeper who can destroy Aether Raid's defense just like Duo Lin before. Both of these units are extremely good, but unfortunately are held back by the prevalence of damage reduction and their inability to pierce it. The original terror of summoner duels, Yuri lands in S tier. Yuri was a ridiculously powerful hero in every single game mode, but after several indirect nerfs such as Hex Trap, Canto Control, and more stall options such as Duo Thor, Yuri definitely isn't the meta-defining unit he once was. But even so, he is still a very powerful hero who can pump out a lot of damage while also being extremely mobile and even offering positional support via foul play. Yuri has also gotten a few new toys that have allowed him to patch up some of his weaknesses, such as easier access to no follow-up and damage reduction via Remote Sparrow. Yuri definitely isn't a unit you want to underestimate, especially with the right supports backing him up. Cadian Ursula is yet another cav nuke that has been overlooked. She honestly has a ton of power thanks to her built-in dominance, can safely engage with her built-in desperation, and is quite mobile thanks to being a ranged cav who can even ignore terrain effects like trenches. These effects combined allow Ursula to destroy opponents before they can even notice what happened. But unfortunately, as many other cav nukes, she does struggle against damage reduction and guard, as she doesn't have access to damage reduction piercing or tempo. Our newest cav nuke, Bridal Anna, can pump some serious damage while also stealing your dragon flowers. Anna has some great things going for her, such as a ton of bonus stats, offensive no follow, and most notably, 15% speed-based true damage that does work with AoEs as well. Now with her normal kit, Anna can do quite well, especially if she can get some help to proc her Deadeye via cooldown supports. But she really shines if you throw her in with Duo Asker, who can help her charge up an AoE, which lets her shred opponents and then even escape with her Kanto ally 2, warping her to safety. Up next is our newest terror in the meta, Legendary Male Robin. In all honesty, Robin doesn't have quite as much nuking power as many other heroes in this tier, but he more than makes up for it with his insane support. Robin grants himself and his allies Grand Strategy, which is an Omni-Unity effect. This effect not only gives the allies a ridiculous amount of stats, but also makes them somewhat debuff proof, as every debuff only gives them more stats, which can get really insane when you start stacking Unity effects on the heroes. Robin also provides a nice global debuff to the enemy team, making them even weaker. When it comes to Robin's own nuking capability, he is very similar to Mark, where he is essentially a blunt stat ball you just beat your opponent over the head with. Now fortunately he is an infantry, which means he does have access to a plethora of powerful skills such as Special Spiral 4 or Times Pulse 4. Robin is what I consider a nuke that will age extremely well due to his supportive effects. Harmonic Sonya was one of the most powerful nukes released last year, especially in Summoner Duels, and she is still a fantastic hero, but she has lost some of her uniqueness due to the introduction of Guidance 4, which has given all infantry and armors her warping effect. She can still wipe units off the board with her powerful AoEs and even charge up other hero specials with her harmonic skill, as long as they're from Echoes or Awakening. While AoEs are very powerful, there is a way to play around them in Summoner Duels via positioning well, and due to her low resistance, Dragon Wall can also shut her down as well. Duo Dagger is still a powerhouse unit and very influential in SD. This is mostly due to her insane Pathfinder support, but she is also a very competent nuke. This is largely due to her weapon offering a ton of stats by inflicting penalties based off her bonuses, as well as her preference skill, granting full no follow-up and even more stats. Duo Dagger may not be as powerful as she once was, but don't underestimate her, as she can pack one hell of a punch. My final unit in double S tier is going to be Ascended Joshua, who is a fantastic nuke who can adapt to his situation well via his ability to have full sweep effect or true damage. This allows Joshua to deal with problematic advantage units or just type units without no counter disrupt. He can also run a nice build that makes great use of lethality. The only thing Joshua needs is some type of special cooldown, which is easily accessible via Infantry Pulse, Asker, or even Duo Crawl. In my opinion, he is easily one of the best Ether Raid's defense nukes, and is definitely someone who fits amazingly well into a catch rate wall. Double S tier contains some of the most powerful nukes in the entire game. They all excel in several categories and have powerful effects that make them stand out in competitive game modes. Many of these heroes could be argued to be triple S heroes, and many of them would be if this was a different tier list. I want to start off double S tier with a few heroes I call support nukes. These heroes are units who do nuke exceptionally well, but also provide invaluable support that makes your entire team stronger. These units' nuking capability is probably more in the S tier category, but their support makes them stand out, and in my opinion pushes them up a tier. These are the heroes I think will age the best, and will be on tier lists like this for a very long time. First up is the man himself, Duo Asker. Duo Asker is a ridiculous unit who has enabled and empowered so many different types of strategies. Asker has pushed the special spamming meta by a large margin, and has enabled many nukes to run entirely new builds, such as AoE builds or big special builds like Lethality. This is largely due to his ability to reduce allies' cooldown by 2, which is just ridiculous. This is also while providing Resonance Blades and Shields, which are nothing to scoff at. Now when it comes to Asker's personal damage, he is not someone you want to underestimate. He's what I consider a tank nuke. Essentially, he can smack you extremely hard in the face with a damage reduction piercing Bonfire or Ignis, but also take very little damage due to his flat damage reduction, AoE damage reduction, and extreme bulk. Duo Asker also works well with other supports, which allows the ceiling of his damage dealing to be quite high. Duo Asker is absolutely a unit who's only going to become more prevalent in time in all game modes, so you better get used to dealing with him. Next up is the boogeyman of Summoner Duels, Duo Thor. I mean, what is there to say? Thor is just way too busted. She has a way to pre-charge her special every single turn. She offers herself and allies special acceleration via World Breaker, has amazing attack and resistance, meaning her AoEs are ridiculously powerful and can get past Dragon Wall as well. Her duo skill is literally a no button that just shuts down entire strategies while also applying gravity to units in cardinal directions. She also offers stall to shut down units who try to abuse extreme movement, and to top it off, she even exposes herself, which causes enemies to take an additional 10 true damage per hit. I mean, this unit just does everything, and is good in every single game mode. The only downside to Thor is that her nuke does take some time to set up. Typically, you'll wait a turn to drop an AoE, then wait for it to charge up again. So she isn't a nuke who can nuke consistently over and over again. Though some of that can be remedied with other supports. Once again, Duo Thor is a hero who is going to be around for a very long time. She's just that good. Speaking of yet another meta-defining hero, we have Duo Crawl. When it comes to nuking, what makes Duo Crawl such a standout is his ability to control his own and allies' cooldowns. This means he can easily spam Deadeyes or delay them by 1 cooldown to get around things like Hardy Fighter. And when you combine that with armor effectiveness, you have a unit who can consistently kill saves. But then you take all of that and you add in all of his other effects, such as his Grand Strategy Duo skill, to change fate granting another action to Chrom, and his access to all the good infantry skills. Chrom just has tools to do everything he wants to and more. Now he does have some weaknesses. He is quite slow and reliant on his guaranteed follow-up attack, so there are some ways to shut down his ability to double. But a well-built and supported Chrom can also find ways to get around those weaknesses. I mean, what else is there to say? Everybody knows how powerful Duo Chrom really is. One of the standout units of this year has to be Cadian Lind. This unit is just so ridiculously good and enables so many other units to perform at their full potential. Starting off with her support, she grants no follow-up to everybody, which is really big, as Cavs and Flyers can definitely be held back by their inability to get this effect. She also grants a terrain ignoring bonus, which means Brave Self isn't afraid of your trenches anymore, and he's gonna kill you. Cadian Lind is also no slouch when it comes to her own damage. She has almost everything she needs to destroy you. 20% speed-based true damage that works with AoEs, no follow-up, slaying, and damage reduction halving that works with the AoEs as well. Lind's AoEs are just ridiculous and destroy most enemies. Now obviously she does need some help to get those AoEs pre-charged, but just like Duo Asker, she is very synergistic with other supports and fits onto most teams. Lind is a fantastic nuke to pick up, especially if you're a big fan of cavalry or flyer units. We are currently in a healer renaissance, and when it comes to the best healer nuke, I have to give it to Duo Elise. This unit is so stupidly good, it's annoying. Every time I see her on Aether-Raid's defense, I know I'm in for a real match. When it comes to damage, she has a great stat line, offensive no follow-up, special acceleration, slaying, a powerful healer special, and of course 15% true damage based off the foe's attack. But then we look at her safety options, and she has Dazzling Staff, one of the most safe options in the entire game, and to make it even crazier, she applies Flash after combat, making it safe for all your other nukes to engage too. But of course, we're not done yet. She also applies Gravity when her special procs, and just in case you need more damage, her duo skill grants Dominance. This unit is just ridiculous. She really only has 2 weaknesses in my opinion, which are the 2 most common ones for Cavs: no access to anti-guard, and no way to pierce damage reduction. Even so, this unit is a fantastic damage dealer, while also providing some very annoying support. We have yet another Bernie hitting the tier list, but this one isn't just a great support, she's also a scary nuke. Now unlike her cavalry brethren, Spring Bernie actually doesn't have a weakness to guard or damage reduction, which is big. This means Bernie can tear through many more tanky units, especially when you consider she can effectively get 16 attack and speed just from her weapon. She has built-in defensive no follow and even damage reduction, which means Bernie essentially has all of her bases covered. The only support she really appreciates or needs is just 1 cooldown, so if the opponent can't counterattack, she can still proc her Deadeye. Overall, Spring Bernie is one of the best cav nukes in the entire game, and she even offers her infamous HP manipulation support, meaning she can enable Vantage and Gale Force strategies as well. Once upon a time, Thrasier came and destroyed the Aether-Raid's meta. She was our first super threatening defense mythic, and she essentially ended the Age of Dragons. Unfortunately for Dragon fans, she's back, and more powerful than ever. Her Refine and Remix was very good, and gave her a ton of firepower while also allowing her to provide some great damaging support via her exposure effect. Thrasier is a very safe nuke with her built-in desperation and can even get around those pesky stat stackers with low speed res as well. Now Thrasier isn't perfect. Her preference skill takes up the B slot, which means she can't run Special Spiral 4, which is a big weakness. But even so, exposure offers 10 true damage per hit, which definitely helps her punch a hole through most enemies. Another hero who got overlooked last year is Legendary Deirdre. This unit is very powerful, especially when we are constantly getting new meta dragon tanks every single month. Deirdre inflicts a whopping minus 18 attack and resistance on her enemy, so you can kiss your Dragon Wall damage reduction goodbye. Deirdre is essentially a dragon killing expert, as she not only robs them of their damage reduction, but also their adaptive damage. But Deirdre's biggest selling point has to be her preference special, Circlet of Balance. This special grants Deirdre a miracle effect, which means she can safely engage on foes and not have to worry about dying to a counterattack. You can combine that with all the infantry skills, and you have a nuke who is surprisingly difficult to deal with. Up until this point, I think it was very clear that Summer Claude or even Cadian Byleth was the very best 4-star demote we had ever gotten. But let me introduce you to Young Rebecca. Now I hate to say this, because this unit robbed me blind during my summoning session, but man, this unit is stupidly good. She has all the effects you could want, and synergizes extremely well with attack speed finish, which is one of the best defensive skills in the game at the moment. Overall, she is effective against flyers and beasts, She can get 14 true damage per hit when you consider finish in her A slot. She can easily run tempo in her B slot because she has a built-in 30 to 60% damage reduction. She can even run Oath in her C slot because she has built-in Times Pulse. I mean, this unit just covers all the bases, and it makes her arguably the best 4-star demo ever, especially when you consider her amazing fodder. Let's continue with the theme of making children fight in war with Katie and Nino. Now, Nino is not only one of the best fodder units in the entire game, but she's also one of the best mage nukes. This unit was originally designed to be an infantry brave violet, taking advantage of speed preempt. But I think she does better by just doing pure damage. This is largely due to her weapon giving her up to plus 21 to all stats. That's right, 84 stats just from her weapon. And when you combine that with all the powerful infantry skills, you have a scary nuke. But that's not even the end of it. Nino is extremely mobile. I'm talking Yuri mobile, but she can actually ignore terrain as well. This means Nino can threaten a large portion of the map, and the best part is, she's surprisingly tanky due to her ton of stats and 50% damage reduction. Nino is definitely a unit who is flying under the radar, but I think that may change once she gets a rerun. Now, what's better than having Celica in double S tier? Having two Celicas in double S tier. First up is Ascended Celica, who is essentially just Legendary Celica upgraded. Well, before she got remixed, that is. Now, Ascended Celica really stands out due to her built-in miracle effect that has no map restrictions, which means she can proc it every single combat. This makes Celica obnoxious to kill, because if you run finish on her, she's also healing back into miracle range. You add some nice true damage, anti-guard, and the infantry toys of Special Spiral 4, and you have a powerful nuke who just won't go down. Now, the one disadvantage is that her optimal build does not use her preference B skill, but in all honesty, you can just get no follow-up from a different source, and it's not that big of a deal. While Ascended Celica is an annoying nuke, Legendary Celica is just about damage all the time. Celica's refine and remix gave her a big facelift and fixed a ton of her weaknesses. Just like her husband Alm, Celica gets a massive 25% true damage based off the foe's resistance. This is one of, if not the best types of true damage, as it scales with the opponents who are more tanky. Oh, and did I mention it works with AoEs too? She also gets special acceleration, which is as great as it allows Celica to ramp into bigger specials or to get past guard, which is very prevalent. She even has built-in Times Pulse, so she has an easier time charging up big specials like AoEs, and to top it all off, Legendary Celica has a built-in Desperation effect with no HP requirement and full no follow-up. This means Celica can send her enemies to the Shadow Realm before they even get a chance to draw their first pathetic card. Celica does have a few weaknesses though. She doesn't have Slaying built into her weapon, which does mean she is vulnerable to Scowl effects that can reset her special cooldown, and she also doesn't have access to damage reduction piercing, but instead damage reduction halving. This is still very good, but it's definitely not as powerful. Arvel is easily one of the best defense mythics we've gotten in a while. Arvel just embodies damage, while also supporting the entire team with a debilitating guard effect. Let's start off with Duality, which gives Arvel a visible buff to attack and resistance, while also giving them weapon triangle advantage against all non-colorless units. That's right, Arvel is strong against more than 75% of the characters in Fae. 20% more attack and inflicting 20% less attack on the foes is a big deal, and it makes Arvel much more bulky than they seem. But then we also get 20% true damage based off their resistance, and it works with AoEs of course. And AoEs are definitely what Arvel wants to do. Arvel can get a massive visible attack stat and completely shred through opponents, and due to their high resistance as well, Dragon Wall isn't saving them. Arvel's only real weakness is their low speed, which means they are reliant on guaranteed follow-up attacks and weak to no follow-up, but even so, that doesn't change much when you're reduced to 1 HP with an AoE or blown up by a ridiculously large iceberg. And did I mention that they work really well with Bridal Cat Trio? The final unit in double S tier is going to be Legendary Yuri, the upgrade to one of the most meta-dominant heroes of last year. Legendary Yuri is honestly a bit ridiculous, and if it wasn't for one single thing, he would have ended up in triple S tier, but we'll discuss that in a little bit. First up, Legendary Yuri does essentially everything old Yuri did, but just a little bit better. Legendary Yuri gets a nice plus 9 to all stats effectively, 20% true damage based off speed, that once again works with AoEs. You may be noticing a trend here. Offensive no follow-up, and even 30% damage reduction. This essentially covers all of base Yuri's weaknesses, where sometimes he may be lacking a bit of firepower, really needed no follow-up support, or even sometimes die to counterattacks. But the really big deal in my opinion is that he's no longer weak to stall. This is massive, as it removes one of Yuri's biggest counters in the meta. And you can't forget this is all on top of Yuri's insane mobility and foul play support. Overall, this makes Legendary Yuri quite flexible with the builds he can run, and his introduction of Hexblade even allows him to get adaptive damage. The one thing that holds Legendary Yuri back in my opinion is that his preference skill is in his C slot, which means he can't use Times Pulse. This really sucks as Yuri's best builds are going to be Lethality and AoE builds, which heavily rely on special cooldown. Now this can be remedied with supports like Duo Askra or Chrom, so it's not a death sentence by any means, and you can even choose to run a special Spiral 4 build with Ruptured Sky if you'd like to. We have finally reached the pinnacle of ranged nukes, SSS Tier. These are the 5 heroes I consider the very best nukes in the entire game. All 5 of these heroes can do ridiculous damage and destroy a majority of the heroes in the game. These heroes are not in a particular order, as each of these heroes do excel in different situations and different matchups, but all of them deal insane damage. First up is our Brave Destroyer Lysithea. Brave Lysithea got one powerful find that allows her to not only hit very hard, but reliably proc specials with her special acceleration, which is key in today's meta. Combine that with Special Spiral 4, and Lysithea can put out big numbers that can't be stopped by normal damage reduction. She also is extremely safe as she has a self-activated Desperation effect that can even allow some HP manipulation for her teammates. And she even has Cavalry effectiveness and Oath Warping built in as well, which is a nice bonus. The only tiny thing Lysithea needs is no follow-up support, but that's easily accessible for infantry units. Ascendant Ishtar is just absolutely ridiculous. Special Spiral 4 and Remote Spiro unlocked her true potential, and now she can quad opponents, unleashing double Ruptured Sky every battle. Unlike other brave nukes like Duo Corrin or Winter Lysithea, Ishtar is infantry, and that's a massive difference because it completely removes her weakness to deflect magic and other damage reduction effects. The best part is she also has tempo built into her weapon, meaning there is no way to stop her from dropping a Ruptured Sky in your face. The only support Ishtar needs is no follow-up, which, just like I will be mentioning a lot, is not a big deal for infantry units. She's essentially just a machine gun you could point in any direction and watch things explode. Legendary Alm is historically one of the most powerful nukes in the entire game. His original debut saw him unleash hell in every single game mode as he shredded through even the most powerful tanks. Over time, Alm did fall off a bit, but his refine and remix gave him almost every single effect he really needed to become meta dominant. First up, Alm arguably has the best true damage in the entire game, with 25% based off the foe's defense. Like I mentioned with Celica, this is extremely powerful as it scales with the enemy's bulk, so even the most powerful tanks aren't walking away without being chunked. And it also works with AoEs if you want to go that route. When it comes to Alm's special category, he is almost perfect. He has anti-guard built into his weapon, which makes his preference special Lunar Flash 2 get right past guard. Speaking of specials, Lunar Flash 2 is the perfect special in my opinion. First of all, it's only 2 cooldown, which means Alm doesn't need special cooldown support. It pierces damage reduction, which is a massive factor as it opens up Alm's B slot for whatever he wants. It reduces defense or resistance by 20%, and boosts damage by 20% of Alm's speed. The reason this is so good is because these 2 effects are difficult to stop, unlike specials that scale with attack, which can be drastically reduced by preference weapons or skills, for example by units like Femortis, Goto, or Shell. Also, Alm wants to stack a ton of speed, so converting it into damage is a nice bonus. When it comes to safety, Legendary Alm has a built-in Wind Sweep effect, and an open B slot, which means he can run Water Sweep as well, giving him a full sweep effect. This can allow Alm to counter advantage units and safely destroy a majority of tanks in the game without the fear of dying to counterattacks. But that B skill can also be used for more firepower if you want, via skills like low speed defense, or just more speed via Seal Speed 4. The final game changer for Alm is the introduction of Attack Speed Hexblade. This can give Alm adaptive damage, which is extremely powerful against a lot of Omni tanks who tend to have lower resistance like Brave Dimitri, Lucia, or Alir. Now Alm does need no follow-up support for his most optimal builds, but he can also just run no follow-up in his B slot if you want to be more self-sufficient. When it comes to weaknesses, Alm has one: no slaying. Now Times Pulse 4 can fix this to an extent, as it can ensure Alm is able to proc Lunar Flash every single combat, but it does mean Alm is more weak to Scowl effects, which have become more prevalent in the meta. And it also means Alm can't proc Lunar Flash twice with a quad attack via Bridal Catria support. Speaking of Bridal Catria, Alm uses Catria fantastically, and it really pushes him into the absurd levels of damage where essentially nothing survives. Something you will notice with these top tier nukes is that they can consistently pierce damage reduction, and they have ways to get past guard. But Legendary Shez is the exception. Unlike other nukes, Shez Come to Fane is just absurd damage, which isn't surprising when you consider she can get effective damage against every single unit in the game and has the dual phase Brave weapon. This allows Shez to absolutely annihilate units without even giving them a chance to attack. Now when it comes to specials, Shez has some good points. She does get special acceleration, which can help her hit Ruptured Skies or even lethalities, but she doesn't have slaying, which honestly does hamper her a bit. If she did, then she can consistently Rupture Sky every single Brave attack, even through guard. Shez does do so much damage though, she doesn't necessarily need damage reduction piercing, But she does have a few options to run a Rupture-Side build with Special Spiral 4, or even go for a Lethality build with some powerful cooldown supports. Shez is a menace in Aether Raid's defense, and especially Summoner duels, where she can not only destroy tanks, but also protect herself with Speed Preempt. If you're looking for damage, look no farther, Legendary Shez is your unit. The final unit in Triple S tier is yet another legendary, and one of my most favorite nukes in the entire game, Legendary Veronica. Veronica is honestly the full package, and one of the few nukes with almost no true weakness. Veronica has absolutely amazing offensive stat line, and her weapon can grant up to a massive 14 attack and speed. She also has built-in defensive build follow-up, which is big for cavalry units as it means she isn't reliant on a unit like Katie and Lynn for support. When it comes to specials, Veronica has one of the best in the entire game, and it's extremely consistent. The combination of a 2 cooldown damage reduction piercing special and anti-guard means Veronica will always proc enclosure in every single combat that she doubles, which is essentially all of them. And it also means that she works extremely well with the most meta support, Bridal Catcher, because it means she can proc 2 enclosures before the foe can even counterattack. Now when it comes to safety, Veronica is also one of the safest nukes in the entire game, as she can not only get a Desperation effect with no HP condition, but she can also get a full sweep effect. This means Veronica can engage on any unit safely, as long as they have a few friends around them. This also lets her counter advantage units as well. And to top it all off, she's a cavalry nuke, which means she's very mobile and can even take advantage of Far Trace to retreat to safety. If there is any weakness this unit has, it's that enclosure scales off attack, which can be heavily debuffed by meta-safe tanks like Mortis, Goto, or even Young Hector. But even then, she's gonna still hit really hard. And with that, my ultimate ranged nuke tier list is complete. All 211 heroes ranked from Triple S to E. I would love to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. Let me know what you agree with and what you don't, and make sure to let me know who your favorite ranged nuke is. Once again, I'd like to thank all my members for all their support. This video took a ridiculous amount of time to make, so if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. And if you really want to help support the channel, join as a member down below. This has been Oblivion. Catch y'all later.